Hello and welcome. Sometimes you come across a phrase that just feels right, like a deep breath. Today, we're going to explore one of those, a beautiful four-character Chinese idiom that holds this incredible, timeless piece of wisdom. And the story behind it, it's all about hardship and, well, an even greater amount of patience. So let's dive in.
So, think of our time together today like we're unrolling an ancient scroll. First, we'll just look at the phrase itself. Then, we're going to zoom in, character by character, almost like looking at each brushstroke. After that, we'll get into the amazing story of the poet who wrote it down. And of course, we'll talk about the wisdom inside it, and maybe figure out how we can bring a little of that into our own lives today.
Every idiom is kind of like a time capsule, right? It carries a little piece of history inside. And this one is really special. It holds a piece of advice that people have been sharing for almost 1,000 years. Just imagine that.
Okay, here it is. These four characters, Shui Dao Qu Cheng. Now, these aren't just words on a page. They actually paint a picture. It's a powerful metaphor that first showed up in a letter, written by a truly incredible poet while he was going through one of the absolute hardest times of his life. So, to really get what the whole thing means, I think we have to break it down. Let's look at each piece, each brushstroke, you could say. We'll just go through it one character at a time and let the picture build itself in our minds.
All right, first up, this character is Shui. It's pronounced Shui, and it means water. So simple, but so powerful. It's really the source of everything that's about to happen here.
Next we have Dao, pronounced Dao. In this phrase, it means arrives. So putting those first two together, we get water arrives.
The third character here is Ke, that's Q. And what is a Ke? Well, it's a channel, or maybe a ditch. It's the path that's been made, just waiting for the water.
And finally, we have Cheng, pronounced Cheng. This means something like is formed or is completed. So when you put all four together, what do you see? You see this complete, totally natural process, just happening. Okay, so who came up with this beautiful image? Let's meet the man who first put these characters together. We're talking about the great Song Dynasty poet Su Shi. This guy was a true Renaissance man of his era. You might also know him by his other name, Su Dongpo. So before we jump into his story, let's just be really clear on what his phrase means. Shui Dao Qu Cheng. Literally, it's something like, when the water arrives, the channel forms naturally. Isn't that a great image? It's this beautiful way of saying that once all the conditions are right, success just happens. It follows naturally. You don't have to force it.
Su Shi's life was a real roller coaster. Incredible highs and just devastating lows. When he was young, everyone knew he was a genius. But he had a sharp mind and strong principles, and that led him to clash with some very powerful people at court. And that opposition, it ended up being his downfall. He was actually thrown in prison and then banished, exiled to this remote, rural place called Huangzhou. He lost everything, his rank, his salary, all of it.
So there he is, in exile. This guy who was once a top official is now facing real poverty. And what he does to cope is, well, it's fascinating. At the start of every month, he'd take his entire budget, which was just 4,500 coins, and he'd split it into 30 little bags. He hung them all from the beams in his roof, and every single morning he'd have to use a long pole to get down just one bag for that day's expenses. Can you imagine? His whole life was suddenly boiled down to the absolute bare essentials. And it's right here, in this place of real hardship, that the wisdom of this phrase is born. He's writing a letter to a friend, and he's explaining this new philosophy that he's developed, one that was really forged in his poverty. He said, it's like saving a little money each day. Eventually it adds up. And that's when he writes the line, when the water arrives, the channel is formed. There is no need for anxious planning. He had learned to stop worrying so much about the future and just focus on the small, important work he had to do each day. And you see, this wasn't just a realization about his budget. It was way bigger than that. It was this huge shift in his whole perspective on life. Su Shi saw a connection between his small, daily efforts and the way water patiently, powerfully carves its own path through the earth. It doesn't do it with a big show of force, right? It does it with persistence. So really, this idea gives us two very different ways to approach things. On one hand, you've got the path of trying to force an outcome. You know that feeling? It's stressful, it's full of anxiety and impatience. But then there's this other way, the wisdom of Shui Dao Qu Cheng, which is all about preparing the conditions.
This path, it's about patience, it's about consistent effort day in and day out, and it's about having a real trust in the process. You just focus on digging the channel every single day, and you have faith that sooner or later the water's going to come.
Okay, so how does an idea that's 1,000 years old actually help us today, in our crazy, fast-paced world? Well, I think it's the perfect antidote, really, to that constant pressure we all feel. You know, the pressure to make things happen right now.
Let's just take a second here and think about this. What's a goal you're working on? It could be anything. Learning a new language, trying to move up in your career, mastering an instrument. So, where in your own life are you digging that channel, just patiently waiting for the water? Where are you trusting that all your consistent hard work is preparing the way for something great to happen?
I mean, you see this idea everywhere once you start looking for it. A student might say, I've studied every single day for months. I just have to trust that when the test comes, it'll be Shui Dao Qu Cheng. Or maybe at work. Instead of stressing about the promotion, she just focused on doing excellent work, knowing it would be Sui Dao Qu Cheng. Even with creativity, you can't force a good idea. You just do the research, do the reading, and eventually it'll be Sui Dao Qu Cheng. See? In every single case, the focus moves away from the result and back to the process itself.
Learn Chinese, one story at a time.